Welcome, everyone, to A Mexican Crossing Lines with your hosts, Sydney Gomez-Schempp.
And Duke Gomez-Schempp.
You're listening to 88.1 FM, KPPPLP Fargo Moorhead, where we are adding local color to your airwaves. And tonight, I am doing a special edition Q&A with Duke and Cindy because I feel like we need to have conversations with each other. I feel like we need to interact. I want to know how my audience is doing. I want to know how the people in our region, in our country, are feeling about a whole range of topics. It feels like we have been in hibernation, in a stasis, kind of frozen in time for half a year now, right?
Yep, it feels like that.
And at the same time, we can't gather, we can't talk, we can't check in. This last 2-3 weeks has been especially tough for me because I've lost 3 family members to the pandemic, and we haven't been able to go to a single funeral. We haven't been able to gather, to talk to each other, and it's very dangerous to do that.
And even traveling, it's just, I feel like almost words you didn't use was like suspended animation.
Right.
It's because it's like, every day I'm getting up, I'm doing something every day, but it feels like, where am I going? And we can't go anywhere. I would never go on an airplane. I'm really nervous about driving someplace. Well, if you break down, getting gas, stay in a hotel, and I wouldn't trust any of that. I trust being at home, and so it feels like we're really at home, and it's just so risky to go anywhere.
And we're one of the things that we do with Duke's side of the family each week, and it's a small miracle that we can manage to do it.
Yeah.
Because you have a pretty big family. The Schempps are a pretty big family.
Yep.
And they get together every week on Zoom. And we and the Schempp family, we have a family reunion each year. We usually meet somewhere, like we met in South Dakota one year and rented cabins and hung out together in the beautiful backdrop of the Black Hills. It was really gorgeous.
Yep.
But we always get together somewhere, nice. And we've been talking a lot about that. And going back and forth, like, well, what if we do this? What if we do it this way? What if we, meet outside somewhere or whatever? And then as we're trying to think about planning this and seeing if it's a good idea or not, you hear about people. Just yesterday, a woman in our community, found out she has COVID after she went to a family gathering. Unfortunately, it was a funeral, but, what is safe to do and not safe to do? It's very scary because you think there are some things that you can get away with doing, and then it turns out it can go horribly, horribly wrong. So I want to talk about all of these things with you guys. I want you guys to send me your comments and your questions. I will be taking questions and trying to answer as many of your questions tonight. You can send questions for me or for Duke or for both of us, whatever you'd like. But we want to talk about the mask mandates, some of which are going up here in Minnesota. Governor Tim Walz has now mandated masks. Also, school reopenings. What is it like where you are? How do you feel about it? Do I have any educators, any teachers, any people working within the school system, bus drivers? How do you all feel about this? I know that I have nurses, doctors that watch us. How are you feeling now that we have this massive surge across the country? How are our healthcare workers bearing under all of this situation? That's what I want to talk about with you today. But first, also, I want to thank everyone for joining us. We have breaking news today. The president just announced that the Republican convention that was to take place in Florida has been Well, it's not been canceled.
It's postponed?
It's going to be virtual.
Oh, okay.
They're not going to meet in person. I've talked to some of my friends today, some of my conservative Republican friends today, and some people think this is a terrible disaster. Some people think it's a great opportunity. The numbers of viewers on conservative television like Fox News have never been better. Why? Well, everyone's at home. Everyone can watch, kind of have a captive audience. The same is true for the press conferences that the president has been holding. I think people are very happy that the president has done this again, that he's now holding daily press conferences, and the task force is meeting and discussing what's happening with the pandemic. How do folks feel about this? And of course, any other questions or comments that you may have about anything that's on your mind, you can send them to us. I will be doing a Q&A today. Duke, how can folks get a hold of us, message us, talk to us?
You can just, if you're on a live stream, if you're on Facebook at 88.1 Fargo Moorhead, go ahead and type something out there in the comments, and or if you want to, I don't want to be jumping over to email, but if you want to just send us some general information or get a hold of us another way, you can email Cindy at kpbpfm.com or me, Duke, at kpbpfm.com. We're broadcasting simultaneously on Facebook at 88.1 Fargo Moorhead and also on Duke 1517 on YouTube. On YouTube, you can also place comments. Cindy's monitoring both streams. I can only kind of do one at a time, so I can jump back and forth. Please give us your comments. If you'd like to support our work, go to kpppfm.com/donate to make a tax-deductible donation to our station, because we are a nonprofit radio station. We're still broadcasting 24 hours a day, even though it's a pandemic. We've done a series of shows on COVID radio, and we've been bringing up the numbers. We've been doing some other investigative reporting. We've been doing shows pretty consistently, throughout this whole pandemic. For a while there, we were doing one every day. Now we do at least one a week, and sometimes more. It depends on, what's going on, because we still are busy people, and we're running the station still. So if you'd like to support us, please do. If you're on YouTube and you want to just make an instant donation, we're doing a super chat, so go down to that dollar sign and make a donation. Go ahead and ask some questions. Information is free.
It's true. And also, I just want to talk about how crazy people are right now. I think that this pandemic has brought out the worst in some folks. I don't know if you've noticed that, they say that idle hands are the devil's playground. Some people need to have their lives busy. Otherwise, they get into all sorts of problems. Lots of folks out there that maybe it's because they've been cooped up too long. They have nothing better to do than attack folks and harass people and be nuts, be crazy. So there's a lot of that going on. Have you noticed that there's a lot of that going on? So Duke, let's start off by talking about the announcement by Governor Walz that he is going to mandate masks. The governor of North Dakota said right after that he's not going to. What do you make of that? How's it going to affect our area?
Well, I'm a supporter of wearing masks, because it's a way that one, especially with an N95 mask, you'll prevent from catching anything or giving anything away. Just the face masks that people are wearing protect them, from the airborne particles that someone else would shed onto them. It would help for them not to shed on other people. So I think it's a good deal, and it's for indoors. I mean, if you go into places, and it's specifically public and private places indoors. You don't have to wear a mask in your house. You don't have to wear a mask in your yard, things like that. But it's just being smart. And our cases are going up. People are dying. Still, people are dying. We're still in a pandemic. And the thing is, it's not just about people who are dying. People who have gotten this, it isn't so easy. It's just not a tickled nose. They're having long-term health problems because of COVID. Things with their lungs, things with their muscles, all sorts of things with their immune systems. So it's a very dangerous thing to catch. I'd rather not catch it. And when the governor of North Dakota came out, he's trying to be the proud governor who never closed down the state, didn't do any restrictions, Didn't care that almost 100 people are dead in North Dakota. Doesn't care that in his hometown of Fargo, North Dakota, has most of the cases in the whole state. Most of the people who died are elders. He doesn't care about that. He cares about him looking good. That he's like, I'm just not going to require having mass ever. And to his school thing, I read the thing that came out from the schools. The schools have to do a lot to really make it safe. In fact, the Fargo School District, they don't even have the equipment to start until September, because they need Chromebooks, they need these iPads, they need all these things because they want to do where people are separated. And they're going to have kids wearing masks at school. Those kids aren't going to keep those masks on. It's going to be really difficult to get children to comply with not spreading this virus around.
I don't see it going well. I think it's going to be crazy. I mean, they're trying to roll out in some places. They're going to be doing like half capacity or less, right? There are states where you could do a lot outside, and that'll be good, especially in southern states where the temperatures allow for education to happen outside for a longer part of the year. But what about northern states like Minnesota and North Dakota? I mean, it gets pretty cold here. We can't really hold all of our education outside.
That's right.
Not to mention the fact that study has come out, which is being cited pretty widely, that children over the age of 10 are just as contagious as adults, which means that a large percentage of students, grade school students included, going all the way up to college students, are going to be able to pass this along to their teachers. And then if those folks have someone vulnerable at home or are themselves vulnerable, that could be really dangerous. What do you think, Duke?
Yeah, it's a consideration that the public officials haven't put out there as their primary, focus is that what happens when the kids spread it around. Sure, the kids haven't been getting sick, but we're still only 4 months into studying the effects. Our surge just keeps on going up and up. It never leveled out. We never had that magical flattening of the curve and going down. It's always been going up and up and up. And in fact, it's getting worse and worse and worse. So it's like just the idea that they just focus on the kids, you got to get the kids in school, and that stuff's flawed too. We homeschooled our kids, and everybody was like, oh, what about the socializing? What about all these things? And it's like, that stuff's bogus. People want their kids in schools because they're really used to it. It's hard to have kids at home and you're working. You have to do childcare, daycare, all those other uncertain things you'd have to do. People love shoving their kids in schools so they don't have to deal with them most of the day. And I think it's catering to that. And those kids are going to bring it back into multi-generational households and are going to spread it around the community. I mean, it's a really dangerous recipe, I think.
I want to read some of the comments. We have Julie from North Georgia, and she says, I wear a mask when I leave the house. I have worked in the hospital. I know the majority of the nurses and doctors. I do the same. Most of the nurses and doctors I know do the same. That's fantastic, Julie. Charlene comments that her governor in the state of Louisiana has mandated that everyone has to wear a mask. And she's very worried about her granddaughter because this was going to be her first year of teaching.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, that would be really scary. My dad is in his 70s and he has pre-existing conditions, and my stepmom is a teacher. So, and I come from Iowa, so in the state of Iowa, they never had mask requirements. In fact, Governor Reynolds there kind of made this mandate that you can't make a law requiring anyone to wear a mask. So when Muscatine County, which is the area where my family lives back home, said they wanted to have a mask mandate, the governor's office said, you can't do that. Does anybody else have that going on in their state? It's kind of crazy because here's the thing about laws, okay, folks? For those of you who are arguing about the masks and the laws about the masks, let me tell you something about the law. I've always said this. A law is only as good as the enforcement, okay? A law is nothing more than a wish, a desire, a mandate, right? It's nothing more than someone saying, I want this. If you can't enforce it or you don't enforce it, then the law isn't very valuable, right? It doesn't really hold any weight because it's not really enforceable. There are laws that we enforce, or I should say, we enforce laws in different ways, not just by having police arrest you or fine you, right? There are other ways in which we enforce the laws in society. There are many laws, for example, that, if you see somebody that's speeding or running a light or driving erratically, other drivers on the road are going to, honk at you or yell at you, maybe even flip you off, right? If you see somebody doing something that is criminal or abusive or reprehensive, I think almost everyone knows that if you saw a baby sitting in a locked car in the summer or in a closed car in the summer, any good Samaritan out there will probably break a window or break into that car to get the baby out, or if they saw an animal in the car in the summertime. There are certain things that society enforces because we know right from wrong, and we push to have those things done. That's why when the president makes a tweet, makes a comment that he's going to defund schools if they don't open up in September, or he's going to do this, whatever he proclaims in a tweet, that's why it has so much importance. That's why it carries so much weight, because just by signaling that he wants this done, there is going to be a certain percentage of society that is going to try to enforce that are going to say, okay, this is what we need to do now because the president said so. He's signaling with his words that is what he wants enforced. And there is a percentage of the population that feels if that's the correct thing to do, they're going to enforce it. So
they're just going to do it.
They're going to do it.
Also, there's law enforcement that has come out and said, we're not going to enforce mask wearing because, one, it's really hard to do. And, what are they going to do? Clog the jails with people not wearing masks? And so there's some sheriffs that have said, we're not going to enforce any rule like that. So regardless of any of that, it's up to us to be wearing masks. And, I bring one with me wherever I go, whether when I'm walking outside or I'm driving in my car, because you never know what's going to happen. And actually, if you're in your car, I forgot to mention our radio audience. We are airing on 88.1 FM, so KPPP LP 88.1 FM, Fargo Moorhead, adding local color to your airwaves. If you're driving around in your car listening to us, great. I hope you have a radio at home and you can listen to us at home. But take a nice evening drive. It's a beautiful day out in Fargo Moorhead, and there's not a lot of traffic because people, pretty much are staying home. The thing with the masks, though, here in this community, I've noticed, is that the times we have went out, we go fishing maybe once a week, and I see beautiful parks across the river in Fargo in North Dakota because we fish in Minnesota and on a Red River, and I see such a lack of any mask wearing. I'm going to be really curious. Now, I drove downtown in Fargo the other day, just drove down the main drag, the Broadway. And there were groups of people, 12, 13, 14 people, groupings everywhere along the sidewalks. Not a single person wearing a mask. And, of course, North Dakota does not have a mask, mandate. But we also have the most cases in the state of North Dakota and Fargo because people aren't wearing masks. And it's going up a lot in our community here in the Clay County and the Moorhead area. An infant just died the other day, and was younger than 9 months. Mm-hmm. So it's like these things are really serious. And regardless if it's a law, I don't care if it's a law. I'm just going to do it because it's the best thing for me and the best thing for my community. And other people should think the same way.
I have some comments I'm going to read here. Cosmic Angel says, that in Mojave County, this is in Arizona, they have a lot of 0 to 10-year-olds that are getting sick. This trend is going to continue, in my opinion, especially if we reopen. I think that one of the reasons that that is happening, maybe you have a different opinion, but I think that because of summer camps, because of summer programs, because people are starting to relax, especially I think from the 4th of July on, there was a lot of people that got together because they were told that having gatherings outside were not as dangerous. And so a lot of people did get together around the holidays, and a lot of people got sick, especially kids are getting sick. Many of them are not ending up in the hospitals or dying from it, but they're definitely contracting it and possibly passing it on. According to Oregon Sunshine, in Oregon, Governor Kate Brown has mask requirements outdoor as well as indoor. I don't know about that. What do you think?
Well,
Are we at the point that we have to do that because people are just not getting it?
I feel safer. It's a hassle, especially an N95 mask. I wore one for an hour, and it's difficult to breathe. If I was moving briskly, it's hard to breathe. I have another mask my sister made out of material. It's close to N95. It's more comfortable, but I don't know if it's as good as N95. But I support trying to defend yourself and to prevent this disease from spreading. If it takes wearing masks outside, we need to do that too. I mean, it also has to happen is I've read that if we just did this completely for a couple weeks, that curve would drop. If everybody wore a mask for 2 weeks, everybody does it, it would make a huge difference. So it's not like for the rest of our lives.
Yeah, that's one of the things I think is really sad. I think it's really sad because we can't seem to have a consensus. My mom just came back from Puerto Vallarta, Mexico. She got stuck in the pandemic. She went out there around the holidays last year, and then the pandemic hit and she couldn't come back. So she just recently returned, and she said, Cindy, it's incredible. In Mexico, there's, basically a mask mandate everywhere. She said, because she was using public transportation to get around, the cops even stop buses. They stop buses to check to make sure that everyone on public transportation is wearing a mask. So the cops are out there enforcing it. The store clerks are enforcing it. You can't go into any business in Mexico if you don't have a mask. And they're not just making sure that you have a mask. You can't go in the store. They make you sanitize your hands first. They sanitize your feet. They sanitize your feet, your hands. You got to wear the mask or you can't go in any businesses. And here in the United States, we don't have any continuity. We're so divided in this country, sadly, that we can't make a decision in a unified fashion, and it's literally killing us.
Yeah.
Cosmic Angel says, yes, not allowed in the stores without masks for the last almost 3 months, and the numbers are still going up. Cosmic Angel, that is terrifying. That's very sad. I think there's a reason why this is happening. However, I want to mention the fact that it was in China, I believe, that they were talking about how the air conditioning in a specific restaurant helped to circulate the virus to, I believe, 9 other people that were sitting on the opposite side of that restaurant. So air ventilation, air circulation, and air conditioning may be the reason why people are still going out to public places like stores, like pharmacies, all of these different doctor's appointments. And we have air conditioning throughout the summer. People are using air conditioning. So if folks are relaxing their hand washing and visiting with other people, and then you add to that we're recirculating the air inside of homes, it's very easy to see how those numbers could continue to go up. Remember, folks, do you remember that in New York, when they had, when they were at their peak, they got to a point where 40+% of the new cases that they were having there toward the end were all of people that were in their homes, people that were basically staying home all the time, other than those trips out to the stores. So I think that there is a possibility that we're going to see that be one of the main reasons why people continue to get infected inside the homes, because of the air conditioning. Larry comments, the CCP virus is kind of like the Common Core. The numbers don't add up. Oh, you're talking about Common Core in education. Yeah, there's a lot of things that we will not be able to know because we don't have the transparency necessary from China. What did you folks make of the embassy in Houston where they were burning documents on the roof? Did y'all see that?
Yeah, I just saw it last night.
What did you think about that, dude?
I'm not sure what to think because they haven't really reported on what that was all about. It obviously looked like they were scuttling their place.
Yeah.
You don't have a barbecue on your roof. When you've been given 24 hours to leave the premises.
Yeah.
It looked like they were destroying documents. And what was in those documents? I mean, what's going on with this whole thing? I've only seen a few newscasts. Haven't researched it. It doesn't look good. It doesn't look good.
Okay, let's get to some questions here. No, it does not look good at all. It's very telling, I think, that 24 to 48 hours after our government announced that they put out arrest warrants and wanted posters for some Chinese hackers that are trying to interfere with companies that are trying to produce a vaccine for the virus, that all of a sudden the embassy is getting shut down and they're burning everything. So obviously that particular embassy was a hotspot for some Chinese spying, in my opinion. That's what I think was going on there. So let's get to some questions or comments here. Bristy comments, I'm pretty mixed on all of this, but if my child was still in school, we would choose homeschooling. Why put them and the teachers and staff at risk? Not to mention, how does it affect the students overall? I would love to hear from more kids on that. Far from ideal, normal childhood, of course. My son chose home to finish before all of this due to PTSD and anxiety. My prayers for the hard decisions on parents right now. Thank you very much for that, Bristy. Yeah, I mean, I feel really bad for a lot of parents, especially single parents, but in general, mom and dad really depend on schooling so that they can work. I mean, at the end of the day, we have really, that's our infrastructure for childcare in America. So much. How can folks, and this is an economy that is taking a downward spiral. I mean, we have millions of people unemployed. The numbers of unemployment are continuing to rise. And in the midst of that, we don't still know if there's going to be a new package, a new rescue package that is going to help families during this time. So how are folks supposed to put food on the table? How are they supposed to take care of their families if they can't work and they don't have any childcare?
Exactly. Those are really tough issues. And of course, the federal unemployment ends on the 31st or 30th. Is there 31 days in July? Yep. Okay. To look at the calendar, it's going to end in pretty much a week, and that $600 won't be there anymore. North Dakota, Doug Burgum again said, it cuts off on the 31st, and that's our actual work week ends on the 1st. North Dakota unemployment can't split up a payment like that, so no one's going to get the $600 next week, even though they're eligible for it. The federal government has it. It's in the coffers in North Dakota for the people. He won't give it to anyone. They're just not going to have the $600 because they can't give people their full unemployment for 6 days instead of 7, and so you don't get the $600. So this week is the only week that you're going to get one more payment. Plus, on top of that, you got to go out and do 3 job searches a week, go do interviews, and you have to have ramped up looking for work if you're still unemployed. If your business is closed, they're not going to open up. You have to go find a job to continue to get that unemployment in North Dakota. Good job, Governor Burgum.
What do you make of that? Do you think he's just one term? Do you think he just wants to be a one-term governor? Or what do you suppose Governor Burgum is doing this for? Because he seems like he wants to not be reelected. The decisions he's making are really bad.
I don't know. I think he's doing it for fame and fortune for I don't know, some other reasons, not for North Dakotans. I'm sure about that. And yeah, I don't think he gives a crap about getting reelected when his term is up. His term is up this year, right? He has to run for reelection. I'm not seeing much in that. He probably, he's not cut out to be a governor. Ran a ransacked Microsoft company, that bought him out from his accounting software, and just like rode skateboards around. He's not this great entrepreneur. He's someone who's very lucky, who became rich, and everybody likes to honor his richness. And he's just going to go back to being rich and the property owners and the developer that he is. Being a governor has kind of gotten in the way of that for him. So I don't see him being serious about being a governor again.
Okay, I have some comments and questions here I'm going to go through. Larry asks, how come there is no biohazard trash cans to throw your masks in when you leave the grocery stores and Home Depot and Walmart? Larry, I do not know, and I have seen some pretty disgusting displays of trash in the parking lots. Like, the parking lots of many of these establishments look like biohazards to me because of the nasty mess. Don't be a jerk and stop littering. My God, what is wrong with people?
Yeah.
Pick up your trash. We're not your maid. We're not here to clean up after your dirty, disgusting habits, throwing gloves, throwing your masks on the floor. You expect the
very disrespectful,
poorly paid staff of the Walmart or the Costco where you go to clean all that mess up. I guess we need to be better in America about cleaning up after ourselves.
Yeah. And
it's
I like
disgusting.
that. I used to work at a hospital. We had biohazard stuff. We always took things that were contaminated, put them in the right place. They went to incinerators. There was a whole methodology for that. Yes, that's a good idea. That should be implemented. That we should have biohazards when these things are used in. And the thing about throwing things on the ground, I don't understand that. But I always thought that people are, especially Americans, are pigs. I worked at a softball diamond. I kept the groundskeepers and do all this stuff for tournaments. And we had to spend like 2 days cleaning up garbage from all the people. Even though we had trash cans, emptied them throughout the day, took garbage out of there by the truckloads. People still threw things all over the place.
You know what we ought to do? You know how people adopt a part of the highway and they go out and they clean it up? I mean, why can't we do that? Why can't we have group cleanup and go out and make sure that we don't have those biohazards there? My gosh, can you understand how dangerous that is for animals and for children? Little kids and stuff, they're always picking up stuff off the street, and it could be contaminated with a deadly virus.
Yeah.
So, folks, yes, I think we need to clean that mess up. Okay, here's another comment. Campo says, Campo di Fiori. Oh, that's lovely. It's a field of flowers in Italian. Campo di Fiori says, there's been a lot of cities with looting that have not abated for months. They are close in proximity and yelling. Yelling is supposed to spread COVID. Oh, it does. Yelling, singing, especially those activities spread the virus. Dallas, Texas does not enforce masks. They're afraid to tell people, especially on the city buses. Well, that's dangerous as heck. And then we have another comment asking, how are kids going to get to school on the buses without spreading the virus?
Yeah, good question.
Well, what do you make about the bus situation? Because we have, I mean, it's public transportation. We have to deal with it on regular city buses as well as on school buses. How can folks stay safe on the bus, on public transportation?
Well, I heard a teacher on the news last night talking about she had 20 students.
Yeah.
And she's only going to take 5 a day. And so she would see each student once a week. And the kid would only go to school 1 day a week. But it's going to have to be...
Hey, it's better than nothing.
You have to be ramped down like that. You could have, a smaller group of people or staggered times in the school where you'd be picking up... You wouldn't fill the whole bus with kids anymore. You'd every other row or something. So you'd probably have to do 3 or 4 routes, and you'd have to work on the routes. Maybe set everything up by routes. There's planning ways that we can deal with this. To be forced to do it and have your federal funding taken away if you don't, to me, that's the problem. And I think the schools do need to do something, but that this whole thing about too that we're not talking about is who's going to be left out, because they are going to do distance learning. They're going to do stuff over the internet. They're going to give this kid a Chromebook that only works if you have at the actual internet in your house. A lot of families don't have the internet. They have internet on their phone that they can do things with, but it's not going to work for a MacBook. So we're going to have a whole bunch of kids that actually won't be able to be part of the online learning. That is also one of the solutions.
Look, let me say something that I think needs to be said. Our federal government needs to invest in infrastructure for distance learning. And I'm not just talking about a MacBook or a laptop or a tablet. I'm talking about high speed internet in for all communities. Folks, do you realize that in some poor communities, in some states, there's a large percentage of our population, especially people of color and low-income blue-collar workers, that don't even have access to good internet, much less computers for all of the kids, much less the ability for them to they don't have the skill set to do classes on Zoom they don't have any of that stuff at their homes. How is that going to impact students, and how has that already? Do you realize that there is a huge divide, a gaping hole that is left, where some students are not getting the kind of education that they could, even distance learning, because they don't have computers. They don't have the right kind of internet speed. So our federal government needs to step up to the plate and build in that infrastructure. That's something that even during the pandemic we can do. Can't we put in the infrastructure for the fiber optics so that we can have this high-speed internet available to all of our kids? It's time that the Federal Communications Commission classifies the internet as a utility. Remember back in the day when they were laying all of the telephone lines?
Yep.
They classified telephone as a utility, okay, under the FCC. And guess what? It meant that everyone had to get one, because the government realized that this telephone thing, it's not a privilege. It's not something that the rich people can have and the poor people don't need. It's something everyone needs, so people can get information, so people can get medical help, so people can call the police in an emergency. So if you need the internet to go to school, to apply for a job, to do your job, as many of us are doing through the internet these days, then it should be classified as a utility so everyone can get it. And what that's going to mean is that the private industry, the companies that are providers of internet, are going to have to come up with programs for low-income families. They should start implementing these things now. Come on, Comcast.
Yeah.
Come on, all you big internet companies. You know it's the right thing to do. Why don't you step up to the plate and start doing it?
Exactly. And actually, just today, notice came out. I'm on a mailing list for Minnesota, and they're offering grants for the expansion of broadband infrastructure in Minnesota, and it's pretty big dollars to address exactly what you're talking about. But that's the state government taking state dollars and trying to fix a problem that our whole country should be in on, and it's going to be tough because the telecoms have been influencing the FCC throughout the privatization of all this cell towers and everything that's out there. Lots of investment has been done, and lots of money's being made. So they're not going to roll over easy and then be so community centered, but they could. It's definitely a solvable issue.
And if we invest now, I think that the pandemic has laid bare for everyone to see a lot of the disparities in our country. One of them is the lack of infrastructure for this tool, for the internet. And I think, folks, for better or for worse, this distance learning thing is going to be part of the new normal. And it's not just going to be for the schools, it's going to be for telemedicine, right? Where you have a doctor's appointment over a secure internet line. I had one of those today. Okay, people are still going to have a need for this going into the future. We might as well build in the infrastructure to do that. I think these are things that our Congress, I think this is something that our federal government can do right now that will make a huge difference in the lives of students going forward. Somebody was asking me a little while ago about why they're not enforcing masks in the colleges in the dorm rooms. Sergio said, why don't they do live in dorms for the school year and then go home during the holidays? They do that in Alaska. And Mary responds, no way are college kids going to wear masks in the dorms. Mary, I'm surprised that we don't have more COVID parties from college age students. I see them here packing the bars, regardless of how the numbers are increasing in our community. So I don't know. I don't even know how you go about getting college age students who, think they have 9 lives to do anything, much less
that's true.
Proper social distancing and
and again, it comes back to an actual commitment to something. And I think that there's been such mixed leadership with this COVID pandemic in our country and our communities that people haven't even learned that we all need to be responsible, that we all share the cost together, that we are a community. That hasn't been shown to us by our leadership in any of our government officials, really. You have people trying to play catch up. There's one thing I wanted to mention about technically how things are working here tonight and on most of our streams. We multicast, but also there's quite a delay between when we're talking. So we're reading your comments that it takes a couple of minutes sometimes for us to see them. So a little bit of lag. So sometimes we're going to be answering questions you asked a while ago, and we'll be way ahead of you. So there's this lag in there that just makes it the timing off a little bit. But we're going to pick up, whatever we can, and you put your comments in. We want to read them and have this conversation.
You know what else? And I think I talked about this at the beginning of the pandemic. There's been a lot of urban flight, like people that live in really packed communities like New York. I think a lot of people that live in apartments and didn't have access to open spaces and trails and national parks and places where you could still enjoy the world and be outside with proper social distancing, be in your yard. I've never appreciated our lovely home and our yard as much as I do during this pandemic, because I have the luxury of being able to walk around in my yard and walk around in my my husband in my in my backyard,
In your
in my
underwear.
garden.
In your underwear.
uh, yeah, if I want to, in my swimsuit for sure. But we can walk around outside, and we don't see another soul. I mean, we're completely kind of fenced off from the outside world. And for those of you that live in areas where you can do that, that's wonderful. But for people that live in apartments, that people that don't have yards, being able to go out to parks, being able to go out to open spaces is really, really crucial.
Yeah.
I saw places, for example, in New York that were opening or closing, I should say, closing city streets, several blocks at some places, and just opening them up so that businesses could pour their seating, especially restaurants could pour their seating onto the streets,
Yeah, it's
and
like,
social distance,
like Streets Live.
and so that people could walk and play and run and use that extra space as open spaces. What are some of the things folks are seeing happen in your communities?
And two, the important thing about that is like we live in Minnesota and North Dakota. The weather is wonderful right now. But in another 2 months, July, August, September, going into October, it can get brutally cold and you're not going to have the opportunity to open things up. So we need to do it now, open those things up. I think the outside, it's still a little iffy, I think wearing masks as much as you can. But there's a bar up the street called, I forget what it's called, but it was an old AutoZone store that had two giant garage doors, and they made it into a bar, redecorated, but they left their doors in there. And what they're doing now is they open up these garage doors, and pretty much it opens up one whole wall in their bar. So they only have three walls, and the seating goes outside. So it's a total open air environment, and it's in a business area, so the noise is no big deal because there's no people live around there, so they can be loud and everything. And I thought, well, that was really cool that they actually got that building, and they're a new bar. They've been struggling, especially since it's like their first year, and then this pandemic hit, and they had to shut down, and that they're open now. And so I applaud that. But then what happens in the wintertime? It's not going to be the same, and they're going to have less and less people go in there.
Yeah, and I have to address the the hypocrisy that we see on the left and progressives that are in cities like Portland, and this is an excuse to party and wreak havoc and dominate local city governments in all of these cities where all of these protests are taking place. Let's call it what it is. It is an opportunity to wreak havoc and break the law. I guess take off your clothes and moon the police. It's stupid, it's dangerous, it's reckless, it's damaging. You are breaking the law, you are harming people, you are putting people at risk. You can say that you're doing it for social justice because it's an excuse. That's a stupid excuse, and I don't condone it. I think it's wrong. I think there's a lot of people out there that want to say that they want to congratulate themselves. They want to be self-congratulatory because they're standing up to the man, no, you're not. You're not doing anything other than harming the community and putting people at risk while patting yourselves on the back for being social justice warriors. And it is not right. Yeah. How do you feel about the fact that people are still damaging property and doing all sorts of graffiti?
Well, I don't like it. I think that destruction of property, I don't think that's cool. I think that protesting, having peaceful protests is a strategy that is viable and it's worthwhile and should be done. I don't like what I've seen. I'm not seeing it firsthand. Of course, I'm seeing news reports and I'm seeing live streamers, and that's what I watch the most because they're right there. I'm pretty disgusted with what's going on in Portland. Last night, I mean, they're still banging on. Now they have the federal government. I don't like what they're doing either, sending in federal cops to go arrest protesters, and that's not right against the the will of the state officials in the state and the mayors and the governor. I don't like that either. but it doesn't give people a right to try to burn buildings down, try to burn a federal building down. On Monday, a bunch of people went inside the building and started a bunch of fires, and the police actually stopped them. They had to do tear gas, had to get him out of there, had to do arrests and salvage this federal building. And then the federal government sent in these other officers the next day. And so but that first instant, it had, that was a violent protest. And it's, we've done protests over the years, the past, 20 some years. We've done lots of mobilizations of people. I was worried about the ones, the Antifa and the anarchists that used to join our protest. And we had to watch them because they would tip things over. They were known for, not our protest, but in Minneapolis, they were known for taking the newsstands, starting them on fire in the middle of your march, your peaceful march. You got some guy tipping over the newspaper stand and starting it on fire. And you're like, what's going on? Or breaking windows, which, like in LA and some of the other places where, in peaceful protests, that some protesters would just break stuff. It's like, that's not part of the plan. And now it's like, what I see is like, you watch these live streams like, oh, I'm going to watch and see what they destroy today. And it's condoned, it's like you're going to see it, especially in Portland right now. And I haven't even seen the reports today. I watched it about midnight last night, and I saw fires again, lighting fires. They put up a steel, gates type all the way, barriers all the way around the federal building. And people are like trying to rip those down and burn and slash, throwing stuff. And it's just like everybody's walking around like it's perfectly normal behavior.
And I'm just going to reiterate this because I've studied it, I've watched it, and I find it really disturbing that there are so many of these folks that are professional protesters. I mean, that's their gig. I don't want to call it a job because, it's not a real job. It's not work. It's disruptive. It's I think it's a form of domestic terrorism in many cases. And these folks are out there making money. I mean, they're asking for donations so that they can go to the next spot and wreak havoc, and people are paying them. They're raising hundreds and thousands of dollars on GoFundMe's and going from city to city. I just saw Johnny Dangers, which we saw travel all over the globe with these activists and protesters in Portland now. So that is something that we need to stop supporting and to stop funding. Those folks need to, I've watched some of these activists now going for years without a job, just going from place to place to place to place, making money off of this professional protesting. And it's time that we put an end to it. I think that needs to stop. That shouldn't be something that you're still doing during a pandemic.
Exactly. And Cosmic Angel on YouTube made a comment and said, I watched, talking about Portland, I watched till about 3 a.m. It was awful. Portland has been in chaos since last year. The last few weeks have been the worst. So, that's another person who's watching. And it's really sad. I haven't been there for years, but I went there. I thought it was a nice part of the country, but now I wouldn't go there now.
You know what? In Oregon, the governor was down with the protest, yelling, according to Corky here, was yelling on a corner with a group of these protesters. What do you make of that? I mean, are all of the politicians in Oregon crazy?
Yeah,
or
I think
what?
so. I think they're in denial too. I think the mayor was going to speak and got tear gas or something last night too.
Wow.
And that's what I heard. I saw a headline this morning. I knew he was going to go there, but it's like, and I've seen the mayors, saying the summer of love and all this sort of stuff, and I think it's a condoning. I've also seen newscasters spin this story to where they're basically, the valid point is that peaceful protests, are being, militarized police and peaceful protests, this imagery of that is not cool. But then they ignore the pieces like the Antifa group that started the federal building on fire earlier in the week. They leave that out and talk about how the federal government has sent in these thugs, these, boots, on the ground from the federal government. It's looking like, the government's taking over our communities, but then they leave out the piece that, well, and these communities are out of control. It's like there's how much more property do we want damaged? How many more people where they live are going to have people out in their yards and walking down their street, and they can't even go to the store or go outside because you don't know what's going to happen? I mean, how long can we have that continue on?
There's people that they just simply moved. I mean, there was a lot of people that from the Fargo area that were living in Minneapolis that moved out to Minneapolis, and they came home. They were like, yeah, I'm done with Minneapolis. That place is crazy. I got a question here from Lanny. He says, 98% of my property taxes fund the schools. If the schools are shut down, I want my taxes reduced. What do you think about that, Duke?
That's interesting. I look at that too. I get our property tax statement all the time. We live in Minnesota. We have referendums with the schools all the time. Just had one pass, and we don't have kids in school anymore. And, like I said, we homeschooled. So it's kind of like we're paying money into something that we don't use, but it's like, you pay for the roads. Maybe you don't have a car, but, we need roads. We need schools. It is interesting question. The infrastructure needs to be maintained. It's very expensive, but like what's going to happen with the staff? Is there going to be reductions in costs for schools? And yes, if that happens and that becomes the new norm for our schools, we should have a reduction in property tax. They shouldn't be banking all that money for programs that they're never going to do. So yeah, I think it's a valid question. Also, we just don't know yet. We don't even know how we're going to hold school. We don't even know if there's even going to be schools.
And Lisa comments, where I live, the school has computers with Zoom on them and a hotspot box. That's great. I mean, we need to have a uniformity of access to resources and internet and computers across our country. Campo di Fiori comments, you're right, internet is expensive. These poor kids, I feel for them so much. And teachers, they're saints. It's going to take a toll, on education for years. I couldn't have said it better. Honestly, I think it's going to change, irrevocably, it's going to change how we do education into the future. Why? Well, for one, I think the jig is up, especially with colleges, right? The amount of money that people are charging for an education now that they're not willing to reduce the price, places like Harvard, for example, that are going to continue to charge the exorbitant amount that they do for, teleconference type of an education. People are seeing that for what it is, and it is ridiculously inflated, and it has been. I mean, don't you think that it's about time that colleges, especially the cost of education, not K through 12 and beyond, needs to come. I mean, we need to do something about the cost to parents, the cost to students. When I was growing up, parents didn't have to spend as much money for books, for resources. Heck, teachers are taking money out of their pockets because they don't have everything that they need. This is a problem that now, during the pandemic, when basically students and parents have to shoulder that burden of making sure that their kids have all the resources that they need at home to do the education, they're starting to see that there's a huge disparity.
Yep, definitely. And also when it comes to college, I part of me is like, I'm watching these students that if you focus on learning, that's not what they're in college for. They're not in college to learn stuff. They're in college to do all sorts of social activities and do all these other things. Some are there for sports. I mean, and it's like the studies that your day is to focus on your own education and actually get an education and get skilled so you can actually do a job. That's not why people have been in college. So if they're faced with that, which they are being faced with that online learning, that they're just going to be doing their classes in front of the computer and that's going to be their education, you're going to have a bunch of college students that don't want to be in college no more, and they'll just do something else.
Well, I think it would be a really great time for us to have a shift back to different kinds of entrepreneurial activity and technical education. I mean, there's a lot to be said for learning skills that require you to use your body and your hands. I mean, you studied anthropology, but you also learned how to build homes and, do all sorts of things with your hands to physically work.
That's because I quit college and had to earn enough money to support myself. And then when I was up on roofs, I remember I was by a college and I was doing a hot tar roof in the fall when it was just starting to ice up. And I was watching these kids go to classes, just walking to class, and I thought, my hands hurt, my knees hurt, my whole body hurts from doing the shingling and the roofing. I'm going to go back to college, and I'm never going to complain again about having to read a book.
You know what? I have to warn folks, though, that education, the system of education in this country, is like any other a resource that we have. We've poured billions and billions and billions of dollars into it, and it's something that governments would love to privatize. That's what I think that is headed for America right now, that they want to privatize it. It happened to Mexico, and look what that did. Did everybody pay attention to what happened when they privatized education in Mexico? It was a bloodbath. It was a bloodbath. Do you remember that there was missing teachers that turned up, dead? They burned their bodies. This is one of the last federally funded jobs that your average blue collar, middle income educated people can still get, right? These are still jobs that your average American can still have. And they're good jobs, and they pay well, and they have pensions, and they have retirement plans, right?
Yep.
If we take that away, if we don't continue to fund it, if we don't protect it, it won't be here for the next generation. So, think about that, folks, because that, I think, is fundamentally, at the end of the day, we need to ask ourselves, what do we want for our children and our grandchildren in terms of the educational system as a whole? This is the time when decisions are going to be made about how it's restructured, and it's upon, it's the onus is upon us to make the right decisions for the future of the next generations. Let's go to some of the comments here. Bristy mentions that, Evan Duke is from Portland, and he has tons of friends there. And, of course, a lot of the BS is coming from Portland citizens, where there's also a lot of Antifa. But, he's there. What do you make of that? Of course, I think that Evan is wreaking havoc, and his friends in Portland. I thought a lot about that. Of course, he has me blocked on the internet, so I depend on you, all of you out there that continue to follow the activities of these con artivists, to let me know what they're up to. If you know of something that they're up to, please let me know about it. Campo di Fiori comments, it's crazy that they are ruining cities that have not recovered from the closures. It's an opportunity for reckless behavior. They intimidate entire communities. I cannot be out too late because there are protests every day that are still getting out of hand. Isn't that scary?
Yeah.
I mean, when we go to places like Mexico, there are certain places in certain neighborhoods, you can't go out at night. You can't go through certain cities at certain times because of the cartels, because of the uncertainty. You can't drive on certain highways from one state to another at a certain time because you could get held up and killed and robbed. Now, this is America?
Yeah.
This is what it's like in America, where people can't leave their homes, are afraid to go out to do their business, to go get their groceries, to go to the doctor, to go to the post office, because we have this mayhem in our streets.
Yeah.
Do you think that the governors of the states, the city mayors, etc., are doing enough? I mean, there is something to be said about the fact that in Minnesota, especially in Minneapolis, the response from the governor and the mayor was, in my opinion, too little too late. What are your thoughts?
Definitely. And also, they tried to get federal funding for rebuilding. They got denied, which I think they should get federal funding. I think it is a disaster. But yeah, their reaction was slow. And it's like, it is hard to say. When Fargo has had a they call it a riot, but people lighting stuff on fire downtown Fargo and having a confrontation with the police, it is really scary. I mean, we sat here, our next door neighbors, little children, were like, are they going to come to our house? And really, they were frightened. And this is happening a couple miles away from us, in downtown Fargo. And so it is scary to have this uncertainty going on. And what do you do about it? And it's like, I don't want a bunch of law enforcement and military gear shooting people. I don't want that either to stop it. I don't want that sort of, martial law in our streets to stop it. I don't think that's good. But it's like, for the leadership just to cower and hide for a while and not say anything and not come out and try to assure the rest of us that we're going to work this through and work it out. I mean, when that doesn't happen, that's horrible.
Cat Wright comments, they need to shut down the GoFundMe anarchist accounts. And I would go a step further and say that our federal government does not do enough investigating and prosecuting of money laundering crimes, because it's running rampant, especially with Bitcoin, especially with all these GoFraudMes. That's something that needs to be enforced. Remember, a law is only as good as its enforcement. Should it be legal to fund anarchists and people that are going and committing crimes, basically for theater, for show, and not have any investigation of who's funding them and paying them to do that, because it goes through a GoFundMe, because it goes through a Venmo? I think that those things need to be investigated, because what message are we sending to all these activists when they can do this with impunity here and abroad? Somebody commented on my YouTube right now that Lilith Sinclair is all over the news in Portland. And Cosmic says, I saw that. This show has educated me so very well that when I see Lilith, I knew what was coming next. Well, let me just remind you folks that Lilith Sinclair was in the group chat with the Border Support Network people in Tijuana that were involved in the kidnapping and trafficking of an unaccompanied minor. Yes, Lilith Sinclair, the sex worker. Real name, Kiara Horsley. The sex worker, what did she call herself? Full service prostitute. Yes, she admitted that she provided drugs to the migrants. She talked about in that chat group defending the kidnapper, River Doherty and his friends, defending the actions of these anarchists in Mexico, along with people like Joshua Nichols. They were all talking about how this kid, this unaccompanied minor, and the other migrants should have the right to choose to use drugs, and that they should have the right to choose to give them the drugs. These are people without morals and scruples. And let me just share with you this very, very interesting point. I saw that the most recent show that I did on the predator, the sexual predator, Naco Bear, the accused sexual predator, now accused by hundreds of women of being a sexually predatory, abusive, not just him, but his band, Medicine for the People. In the latest show that I did called Naco Bear and Winona LaDuke, in which I exposed the fact that the festival culture the Honor the Earth and Winona LaDuke's previous organizations are damaging to the Native American communities, damaging to children, and they harbor predators. This isn't the first time that this has happened. And guess who came onto the comments along with those defending Nako Bear and calling this reporter a slanderer for simply exposing the light of what is this man is doing to young women, to children. But Joshua Nichols, he comes onto the comments of the show to say that we exaggerate, that we embellish information, and he did this in defense of a pedophile. Think about that. This is the same man that came on the shows to make comments in defense when I was exposing Paloma for Trump. Remember that? These people are willing to defend some of the most disgusting behaviors out there. Once and again, you see people connected to Antifa like Joshua Nichols defending some of the most sick and twisted behaviors on the left. And it is appalling to me that they would continue to support these activities. And I believe that the reason for that is because they continue to get away with it. They continue to get funded. They're not being investigated. They are not being punished for their activities. Don't you think so, Duke? I mean, it has to be more than just law enforcement arresting people at protests. I think they need to investigate these
and I think
networks.
And I think that the FBI and Homeland Security and different groups are aware of leaders in these leaders in these leadership movements that are going around the country and being fake activists. And they should do a lot more. They should bring them up and question them. They should expose them. They should make a bigger deal out of it, and they should do it a lot quicker than they are. Because I know there was the list of all those people came out, and then whatever happened with that. They could be putting a stop to this sort of stuff if they start holding people accountable. And I'm not talking about people exercising their constitutional rights and people that are doing good community work. I'm talking about these fakesters that are out there wreaking havoc in our communities and going from place to place and planning these things that have happened since before Standing Rock.
Brissy comments about how children, another point she says, children on free lunch programs that are provided breakfast and lunch, would they continue to help in food stamp programs for parents, or would parents be forced due to increased food costs to send their children to school for financial help?
That's a good question.
That's a very good question. I think that they need to do something to, some kind of Meals on Wheels.
Yeah, they should be on wheels because I remember one summer in a program over here in one of our parks is that people were concerned about the kids being out of school for the summer, so they developed a food program that kids could come and register, and they'd go to the park every day, and they get breakfast and they get lunch. Mm-hmm. But again, that was pre-COVID times. You can't do that during COVID because then you're exposing kids to each other and to adults and all that. So that's not going to work. It's going to have to be a mobile program. But, that's another doable thing is that we should be giving food support to people. I wouldn't do it through the food stamp program because that's a federal program that has, state and federal rules. I think they just need to come up with something new.
I think we already have the infrastructure built in places like Grubhub and DoorDash and all of these food services. Hey, this is an opportunity once again. The federal government could put dollars into a meal program for children to make sure that kids have food security year around, and then send these things through these already existing food delivery services so that kids can get breakfast and lunch and these are very important programs, not just for the education of children, because you can't You can't study if you're if you're thinking about your grumbling tummy, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is for the health of the children as well.
Yep.
And this is very important for the parents. So let's get to some other questions. And the buses deliver school lunch for the bus stops. Oh, to the bus stops in Oregon. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
Oregon schools never stop feeding kids, even during COVID. That's wonderful. I think it's very important for children to be able to get the food. And I agree with you, Duke, that the food stamp program may not be the best way to fund it. But again, through the private sector, we could get it done because we already have so many people. Plus, it's an opportunity for people to get jobs. They could use their vehicles to drive folks, right?
Yeah, true. And also, just it makes me think, these are good ideas that generating on our chat here. But the schools have the infrastructure to cook, they have commercial kitchens. They have people that are employed there that aren't working right now. You have bus drivers, you have transportation fleets set up already in these towns. We could be utilizing that for much more than just sitting there idle and waiting for school to start in some way. And all those people are basically not working. And so I think that to generate some ideas and actually do some of these things. Politically now, Minnesota is out of session for their legislature. They're in a special session right now, trying to get their bonding bill done, which is bonding is basically funding the infrastructure of the communities. Happens every other year. And they haven't passed their bonding bill yet because they've been dealing with law enforcement issues and stuff. But they'll be in session, and once they're done, they're not going to be back till like next winter, next January. And so you're not going to see any of these changes. It'll have to be done more at a local school board level and not so much from the state level. And also, of course, Congress is going to be out of session. We're going to have another election, and in another, so it's really hard to see any of this infrastructure stuff happen quickly because we're not set up for things to happen quickly in the first place. And also we're in the middle of a pandemic.
Okay, this is a very complicated but important question. Campo di Fiori asks, why are these Antifa and traffickers not on watch lists? Homeland Security? And when they're not being defunded, I wonder who's protecting them and why not go after the money trail? Oh, okay. Let me unpack it. We got to unpack it, okay? First of all, I'm going to give you the short answer. Jeffrey Epstein. Ghislaine Maxwell. That's the short answer. How long did these people connected, very obviously connected to immense power, immense wealth, not just in the United States, globally, how long did it take to investigate them and to bring them to justice? Decades it took. Decades, right? We're talking about some of the most heinous crimes committed by humans on the face of the earth. Smuggling, trafficking. And we're talking about sex trafficking in many cases of women and of children. We know it's happening. This goes beyond immigration fraud. This goes beyond, forcing people into labor. This goes beyond trafficking drugs, moving weapons, bringing in terrorists. It goes beyond that. We're talking about sex trafficking in many cases of children and women. One of the most disgusting things that you can do. And it takes a long time, first, to investigate it. Second of all, don't forget what I told you on my last show about this predator, Naco Bear, and what I've seen from Standing Rock till the present about who is around these criminals, who is supporting these criminals. Politicians like Sandy, or as you know, her AOC, politicians like Bernie Sanders, right? People that work in the media like Sean King, people that are in entertainment like Yonazda Wolf, granddaughter of Farrakhan. These things that they are doing are adjacent to politicians, to people with wealth and power, great wealth and power, and to funding sources that includes millionaires, billionaires like Marianne Thompson Frank, and even George Soros and the Open Societies Foundation. So in order for our government, and yes, by the way, they are on watch lists. I showed you that many of these people, Evan Duke for sure is on a watch list. Lilith Sinclair is on a watch list. Tucker, what's his name? What was his name? Tucker, something Tucker?
Yeah.
They're on watch list. Myron Dewey's on a watch list. What was his name? All those people that I the list, there's dozens of them. I'm sure there's hundreds of them on this list. They are on watch lists. Not just here in the United States. They're on watch lists in Mexico. They're on watch lists with Interpol. They are being watched. They are being investigated. For one, it takes a long time to build a case. It takes a long time to gather evidence. And the reason why these cases are so difficult and it takes so much time to gather the information to build a case and to be able to successfully prosecute these criminals is because the victims are usually, I would say, voiceless, sometimes nameless, sometimes faceless. And what I mean by that is they're undocumented. They're under the radar. They're easily silenced. Many of them come from great poverty and lack of education. Many of them literally don't have the ability to defend themselves and communicate what is being done to them. Many of them don't have birth certificates, don't have documentation, even in their own countries, of who they are. These are people that can be killed, that can be disappeared, and no one would even be the wiser. Do you understand? So these are victims. These victims are hard to track down. These victims are hard to protect, to validate. And for these criminals to be prosecuted, somebody has to be willing to testify against them. Many of the victims of smuggling are complicit with their smugglers. Why? Because they want to come to America. Because they were told they were going to come to America to have a better life. They didn't realize that they were going to have to traffic drugs. They didn't realize that they were going to have to be a sex slave. They didn't realize they were going to be used and abused and exploited. So in some ways, the victims are also the protectors of the criminals.
That's true. And the criminals, too, are pretty slippery. They don't have established houses in these places you can go find them. They're moving around. They're moving from protest to protest to action to action. Actually, if you want to watch for them, just go to Portland. We were in Seattle before. Wait for them there. Go to Minneapolis. Wait for them there. They're going to show up because they don't have homes. They don't have permanent residence anywhere. They drive around vehicles. They get funded to go on trips. And also, if you're driving around Fargo-Moorhead listening to us, we really appreciate it. You're listening to KPPP LP 88.1 Fargo-Moorhead, adding local color to your airwaves.
Yes, and I mean, it's very frustrating. I do media justice work. I do media work, and I call it media justice work because I think that as a paralegal that worked for nearly 2 decades, and I still do some paralegal work on the sides. I still do translating because I, have a vast network of lawyers that I've worked with around the country. So I know how slowly the justice system works. I mean, we have one of the best legal systems and justice systems in the world. We have one of the most robust free speech media in the world. In places like Mexico, if you're a reporter, you can't talk about cartel crimes or the narco government because you'll get killed. It's one of the most dangerous jobs to have in places like Mexico. We are blessed in this country that we can talk about and expose what is happening, whether it's the politicians or whether it's a low-level feet on the ground Antifa person that is committing crimes. We can expose it, we can investigate it, we can prosecute it, but it's still too slow. We still don't have enough enforcement. Remember, laws are only as good as their enforcement. We still don't have enough enforcement for a lot of low level, what the federal government considers low level and petty. Do you know that if you're a money launderer and you're laundering less than millions and millions of dollars at a time, nobody's even going to investigate you? That's why all these GoFraudMe's get away with that. We investigate, less than 10% of crimes involving thousands and hundreds of thousands of dollars. We just don't do it. I don't know why we don't do it. I don't know why we don't put the resources into it. I guess maybe the government feels that they need to go after narcos, right? Because they're we've got bigger fish to fry, right? In America, we're like, well, we need to go after narco governors and narco politicians and cartels. We need to go after these big fish. But I think that we need to lay the groundwork in America to go after all of these more petty criminals, because there is a vast network of these folks that continue to facilitate very dangerous crimes and terrorist activity right here on American soil. And we're never going to get to it. We're never going to really stop it. I think that it erodes justice. It erodes our confidence in our law enforcement, in our justice system, when we continue to see criminal activity go unchecked. Okay. Thank you for your comment, Cosmic Angel. Comments that Cindy and Duke, you both are a blessing. You've really opened my eyes and educated me so well. I honestly feel I can better protect my family and kids with the knowledge that I have received. You are very welcome. It makes my heart soar when I hear comments like that, because the reason that I take the knocks that I do, that I spend the time that I do thoroughly investigating and educating the public, is in the hopes that it helps families protect their children, that it helps people open their eyes, that it helps people see what's happening in our news, around our country, around the world, and be able to see it for what it is. Because we are lied to, we are confused, and our media doesn't do a good enough job. Sometimes we give a very cursory review to issues that are very in-depth. And I think that does a disservice to the importance of what these individuals are doing in our country and to our children and to our communities. Let me just say that if I was able to choose to go to law school, and I did for a moment decide, you know what, I'm going to finish law school and become a lawyer. I decided I was better able to deliver knowledge and information to folks that they could use right now, that they could use in the moment to help their families, because our justice system, because our system of education, and because our laws, our politicians, our lawmakers, whether it's at the state or at the federal government level, are not doing it fast enough. So that's why knowledge, education, and media work is, to me, a very important tool to helping Americans, empower them to do for themselves what our government is not able to do for us. Right, Duke?
Exactly. I think that's really, really good wrap up of where you put your expertise, which I think you bless the community with your knowledge and your willingness to help people advocate for themselves. I've always been impressed with that.
Yes, and just to finish up the question about the investigation of Antifa, Campo di Fiori comments that it would be like dominoes once it gets started and they all start to fall at once. Yes, unfortunately, that may take decades in some cases, but look what's happening. The dominoes are starting to fall. Lots of people are going to be caught up. A lot of people are going down. In the end, all of this evil will be exposed and people will be brought to justice one way or another. And to be very clear, we know that these folks are under investigation. We know that they're being watched. And hopefully, the law enforcement that has in the past been watching our shows and the media partners that we have that are exposing all of this stuff are continuing to do their jobs. I can guarantee you that that's happening. It just takes a very long time, unfortunately.
Yep.
But that's what I have for you guys today. Thank you for your comments, for your questions, for joining me on this important discussion, community discussion, Q&A session here on A Mexican Crossing Lines with your host, Cindy Gomez-Schempp.
And Duke Gomez-Schempp.
You're listening to 88.1 FM KPPPLP Fargo Moorhead, where we are adding local color to your airwaves. Be very good to each other. Wash your hands, wear your masks, and God bless you.